everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is all about assessment centres, my overall experience, some advice and also some tips of things that you can do to prepare. I'm going to try and keep it as short as I possibly can because I can talk for England and my videos could be like 30-40 minutes long. But assessment centres, there can be so many different things at assessment centres. I've been to two and I was successful in both, and they're both really different from each other, so there's plenty of things to talk through. But first of all, I'm going to go into what I did in terms of preparation. So I talked to a lot of people about how to prepare and if they had any overall tips. So for the firm that was kind of my top choice, called Evershed Sutherland, I have had a lot of previous kind of encounters with them, which I guess you would with a firm that you choose to apply to. And I knew a few trainees, or I'd met a few trainees before and had them on LinkedIn. So I just dropped a message to, I think it was 4 trainees that I knew and that I'd met before and chatted to before and even messaged before. So I mean, it wasn't totally out of the blue to be like, hi, can you help me? But it was more kind of like, oh, I don't know if you remember, but we met at my university's commercial awareness competition and it was really lovely to get to know you there. I just wanted to let you know that I've applied to Eversheds and I've got through to the assessment centre. If you have any kind of general advice on what I could be doing to prepare, and then I just kind of picked out specific things for each of them that I was kind of worried about. So I kind of, one person I asked more about the role play, and one person I asked a bit more how you could prepare for the interview and what kind of questions to expect, that kind of thing. And I'd also talked to some people at my own university who'd done assessment centres before. Someone in the year above messaged me, it was so lovely, and just said, oh, I also applied to Eversheds last year and I didn't get through the assessment centre, but I had loads of feedback, so if you need any advice, like, I can give you some. And that was so helpful because he had his feedback and he was just saying, oh well, they told me that I could have done this and I could have done this differently, and that massively helped me. So if you can find anyone that you know who's applied to the firm in the past, to kind of, so you know what to expect, or any trainees, then giving them a message just for a bit of advice is so handy, because watching a video like this is definitely kind of like a first step. It's good to get some genuine advice. However, every firm's assessment centres are different, so talking to someone who's done it before is so helpful, because I gave a lot of advice to one of my friends who also had an assessment centre at Eversheds for the London office. I'm applied to the Birmingham office like a week after me, so I was able to really give her a lot of more specific advice on what to expect. Also, I watched YouTube videos just like the one that you're watching right now, and I took loads of notes. Just hearing loads of people's experiences is so helpful. And also Instagram posts. There's so many legal Instagrammers out there, I am one of them, who have loads of posts about advice to do with assessment centres, and I saved loads of it and read through loads of it, and it's just really good because a lot of it is repetition, but it's good to, the things that you hear a lot of times, you know, that's really, really good advice. So that's another way I prepared. For me, I had a strengths-based interview at my first assessment centre, so I planned out as many strengths-based questions as I possibly could. I looked loads up on the internet, what kind of strengths-based questions they ask, similar ones to kind of different applications I've done before. And I made sure I paired every single strength-based question with something I have done, and I just wrote that down. I even wrote out some full answers in the way that I'd say it, and I practiced saying it to the camera just by myself like this. I kind of picked a random question, or I even got my boyfriend to test me on a random question, so I didn't know what was coming, and I answered it as kind of quickly as I could, as in like I wanted to think of an example immediately. And just practicing that helped so much, because there was a few questions that came up during the interview that I think I wasn't expecting, but I was able to really think of experiences super quickly because I practiced so many times and I had all of these different things in my brain. And also I thought a lot about what my own strengths are. So something I did was I made some sticky notes. I had a sticky note of experience I wanted to mention, a sticky note of my key skills, and a sticky note of the firm's key values. And that was such a massive help to me. I mean, I'd like stuck them across the top of my laptop screen, and it was just really helpful because it was just a constant reminder. And because I'd made those specifically and I picked out very specific things, like even just writing those post-it notes out helped me remember, but just having them stuck above the screen as well was just a massive help to know that if I did forget what I wanted to say or was a bit stuck, then I could look up. I also did a sticky note on some very specific facts about the firm that I might have wanted to mention. So just some of the names of like apps they've made and different things, different achievements and different deals that they've done as well. I just wrote like 4 on there, and I did end up looking up at one point, I think, to say the name of an app just to make sure I got it right. But just having that there was like really, really helpful. And just having an interview online, like you can't do that in real life, so I think it's an advantage of having it online. But obviously if you're watching this and you're doing an in-person assessment centre, then just having like I don't know, maybe I'm not sure how it works, but I'm guessing you have breaks between each thing. Maybe just having a little notebook with you with these things and then just having a reread over. Not tons of information, but just like a few little bullet points of specific things that you definitely want to get in there. Another way I prepared was to go over all of my firm research again. I think it could have been a 20-page document on Eversheds, and I printed it all off. So I made it all, I printed it off, I highlighted my favourite bits, and then I picked out probably like 10 facts that were my most favourite facts that kind of went across all different areas. So my favourite thing about a client deal that they did, my favourite thing about pro bono that they've done, my favourite thing about one of my favourite apps they've made, or AI that I found quite cool that they use. And just having those things, having read that, having researched it, read it like twice, and then picked out my favourite bits, just meant I knew so much about the firm. I was really able to naturally drop it in not just the interview, but you can also drop it in different areas. For example, the role play, I dropped it in there. And with my second assessment centre, which was with Mills and Reeve, I was able to drop a few of the facts that I knew into the group exercise that we were doing. So definitely having that level of firm research, because sometimes a fact that you know about them is really relevant, whilst at the assessment centre that you maybe at the time you were researching it probably didn't think you would even talk about. But just it shows them that you are so interested in them because you know these little facts about them and you're genuinely just bringing them up. The first part I'm going to talk about is the written element. So there can be loads of different things the written element can be. So my first assessment centre, it was an e-tray exercise, which is to do with being sent loads of emails and having to respond to them. And then my second assessment centre, my written assessment was just writing up a memo of what the group exercise was. So I'm going to come back to that one a little bit later so I can link it to the group exercise I did. But in terms of the email activity, it is really, really hard, and a lot of people have told me the hardest part is the written assessment, because you have an hour and a half, loads of emails to respond to, you need to prioritise, pick the ones that need responding to, do the activities that you've been asked to do that morning. And I think it was hard time-wise because you need to make sure your punctuation spelling is perfect, so I was rechecking over everything like 10 times. But I didn't find the prioritising part actually too hard. So if it says partner, it would tell you who they are in the firm, and it has like in little brackets like who the person is that's emailing you. Obviously, if it says partner, if it's a client, you need to make sure you respond to that. And if it says urgent, or can you get this done this morning, or can you get this to me by midday, or can you get this done today, you need to make sure that one's done. You don't have to reply to all of the emails. Definitely remember that. So there'll be emails, for example, someone was saying, oh, welcome to the firm, it's so lovely to meet you, or I'm really excited to meet you actually. And you don't have to respond to that, because, you know, in real life, you will respond to it and say thank you so much, but you won't respond to it if you've got loads of urgent things going. So they don't expect you to respond to that in your hour and a half. It's just to like, it's there to almost throw you off and to see if you answer that instead of a serious one. So if you see that as something like that, skip past it, and if you have time at the end, maybe respond to it. Also, something to have in mind is the way that you write the emails themselves. So I was actually really quite stressed in how to address the person, and I had a really good piece of advice, as if you're worried about that, is address them in the email in the exact way they addressed you. So if they say, hi, so-and-so, kind regards, and then their name, that's exactly the way you respond to it. So I just respond exactly in the same way. That took that stress away, because I was always worried, oh, do I put dear? Do I put kind regards, many thanks? But literally the rule is just reply in the way they wrote to you. And that takes that little element of worry away. Keep an eye on the dates. So for us, they said, we are setting this as if it was in April 2018. So just making sure that I didn't put 2020 on there anywhere. Actually, it's 2021 now. I'm making sure I didn't put 2021 in the box or anything like that, making sure I got the right date and all those kind of things. It's not too bad, it's just the time. I was also given the task to do a client briefing where I had to read, I probably was about 15 documents and write a client briefing about an issue, less of an issue, but it was that there was a new discovery of a renewable energy source, and I had to write about how that was going to impact on the clients. That was going to be sent out a general one-page letter to all of the clients. And a big tip for something like that is use headings, very, very clear. And I made sure that when I read the task itself, they lay out certain things they want you to mention in this client briefing. So I made sure that on my Word document, I wrote down each of the things they wanted me to mention as headings. And then either I left them as headings or I just removed those headings afterwards. It just made sure that I addressed every single thing as I was asked to address, because otherwise you have to keep scrolling up and down to keep checking that you're addressing these different things. So just having that wrote down in my Word document right away meant that I didn't have to scroll back up to look at the task again afterwards. So those are kind of my main tips for the E-tray exercise. So the next part I'm going to move on to is just the next element of my Eversheds Assessment Centre, which was a role play. So I had 30 minutes to read 16 documents, come up with an argument, and then with a partner we did a role play of me kind of arguing an alternative side to what they were arguing. So for us it was I was on the side of people who wanted the firm to buy office B, which was in the suburbs, outside the city. It was better for the environment, but because it was outside of the city it might have been less accessible and didn't match up exactly how the firm normally has their offices. And then the partner was arguing for the office in the middle of the city, and I just had to go through all these documents pretty much and pick out some facts and come up with my own argument. And there was also specific things I wanted us to talk about, so once again I wrote those down on a piece of paper, actually, all of the things that needed to be addressed, and almost like as we were talking to one another I could like tick them off and make sure I was bringing every single thing in so I didn't miss anything out. And in terms of how I picked facts out of those 16 pages, I made little mind maps of each of those things that needed to be addressed, and I picked maybe 3 things to go with each. Because it was really tight, half an hour to read all of those documents. I didn't think I was going to get through them all, and I was worried that I wasn't going to be able to, but I did, just in time. And she actually said to me, oh, how did you remember all of those facts? Because she didn't notice me, like I looked down at my sheet of paper and she didn't even notice, which was quite cool. You're allowed to write notes, but she didn't see me do it because I must have been doing it quite speedily. But just having a pad and paper in front of you, little mind maps, I think they were kind of messy for me, and I would probably, if I was to do it again, do little headings and bullet points underneath, but I was literally in such a rush I kind of just did a mind map quickly for each one. And I do think that really works, and just picking 3 things for each heading, or even 2, because there will literally be a document full of stuff. So the headings, I haven't even said, are things like environment, cost, parking, accessibility to people. And each of those headings, there was loads of different documents, loads of facts about what the government want us to be doing in terms of the environment and things like that. So I just picked out 2 or 3 relevant things for each, just to make sure if you have an activity like that, don't be too argumentative. It was just almost like a nice conversation where we needed to come to a common ground rather than an argument. I made sure that whenever I said something, I was like, what do you think about that? And whenever she said something, I said, that is a really fair point actually, but however, and then I'd argue a different point, and I think it went really well. So they like push you in certain directions as well, so if you are forgetting to mention something, they do tend to help you towards that anyway, so really don't worry too much. And it was just enjoyable. It was just nice to have like a little role play actually. But I will move on from that. There's not really much you can do to prepare for it. I think you can have general commercial awareness, but as was set again in 2018, so we couldn't really mention any commercial awareness or current affairs because we were supposed to set it from 2018. So I think they just didn't want us to mention the pandemic at all. So I actually thought that was quite interesting that they did it that way, and I really liked it. But I think some firms will want you to have commercial awareness. That is actually something I completely forgot to mention in my preparation. I did so much commercial awareness preparation. I think it's just something, I do it generally in my life anyways. Every day I read the business news and I listen to podcasts. But if you don't already do that, just for the week before your assessment centre, just kind of know about what's going on in the world. Pretty much, like, environment is really, really important. You want to know their clients and link stuff that's going on in the world to their clients. The next part I'm going to talk about is the interview. So mine was an hour-long strengths-based interview. So the questions were a lot like, oh, when was a time when this happened? Like, worked in a team, or when did you work towards a goal? Or how would you react if... So for example, she asked, how would you react if a senior to you at the firm, you did a piece of work, gave it to them, and they said it was wrong and they wanted you to redo the whole thing and get it to them by the next day? It's the end of the day. And I just kind of explained what I would do there. And for each, there was 8 questions like that. So either situations I've had or situations I may have. And then for every single one, there were sub-questions, the same sub-questions, which was, what would you enjoy, or what did you enjoy? What wouldn't you enjoy? What skills would you use? And sometimes it was like, what would you do differently, and things like that. So again, my strengths-based question planning was so helpful there, because I had an answer and I'd also planned what I enjoyed and what I didn't enjoy about each of those. So in terms of the didn't enjoy part, I feel like that can be difficult because you don't want to come across as extremely negative. So I always made sure that if I was talking about something that I didn't enjoy or something that was challenging, I always turned it back around to a positive. So I talked about how, as a course representative, a few members of the team just weren't replying to messages, and I found it quite difficult in that situation because I really, really wanted to kind of push for change within the law school, but no one really wanted to help with that. And I just said how, despite the fact that that was not a very nice situation to be in, where no one was responding because everything was done kind of over WhatsApp and no one was replying, I just talked about how I just set up a meeting. I just kind of went for it myself and said, anyone who wants to come to this meeting and help me out, please do. And 2 people showed up, and we made loads of changes and went to this big forum and fed back loads of feedback from the students. And that's why I turned around the negative to say that actually it gave me the opportunity to take a lead role that I wasn't expecting to have, but I really enjoyed having. So just having that awareness. So I hope that kind of helps you if you didn't know what to expect in a strengths-based interview, just to think, plan the questions and pick out experiences. For every experience, always think what was good, what was bad, what skills did I use, what did I learn. Just being friendly, smiley, and asking some questions at the end is always good. That bit's not assessed, but it's just a way to kind of show a little bit more about you and just have a nice conversation at the end, you know. If it's just the end and you're like, oh no thanks, bye, they might be a bit like, oh, but you want to show them how interested you are about the firm. So I always tried to ask two questions, so I wasn't keeping them for a really long time. I just kind of, because I know they wanted to get on with the rest of the day, so I just asked 2 questions and that seemed to go down quite well. Moving on to the second assessment centre now. So all I had at the assessment centre was a group exercise and a written exercise. So the group exercise was an issue that we needed to hack. It was called a hackathon, and for that problem they wanted us to come up with an idea that the firm could implement, where it would allow the people who work at the firm to have water cooler moments, which is kind of where you bump into each other and have a chat, which they can't have at the moment because of the virus. So we kind of had to brainstorm a load of ideas, then break it down, and then do the strengths and weaknesses, and then create a presentation all within an hour. So my group were all really, really lovely, so that was super nice. And we actually ended up going for my idea, which was to create an app with like forums and chat rooms on different topics that they could create new topics on, but things like hobbies, sport, a parents group and stuff like that. And then also another element of the app where you can walk around the office virtually as a little person and click on other people who you can see there throughout office hours and have a little conversation with them. Either you can ring them or message them, and that was kind of the overall idea that I came up with. So I really, really liked the fact that we went with my idea, because I think that made it easier for me, because I kind of thought, oh okay, this is going well. If everyone likes my idea and that's what we're going for, I feel like I will be able to kind of continue to talk and continue to contribute, because I really love the idea because it was mine. But yeah, just not saying that in a group exercise you have to be the one who comes up with the solution, because you really, really don't at all, I don't think, to succeed as such. But I think definitely having an idea, if you do have an idea, just try and argue for why you think that idea is a good idea, and hopefully that's the one that they choose. Also, keeping an eye on time. Someone in the group always mentioned, okay, we need to move on to the next part now because we haven't got very long left, is really important. But also in terms of a presentation, I think something that people were forgetting about in my group, which I had in my mind a lot, was who's going to say what order are we going to do it in. So I kind of organised that element as well. So I said, okay, so we've only got 10 minutes until the presentation, so let's organise who wants to say which part and then which order. And I just kind of kicked off and I said, so I'll do the introduction, just kind of introducing the idea, and I will outline each of the things we're going to be talking about, which was our 3 key elements to the app, strengths to the app, weaknesses and how we mitigate the weaknesses, and future steps. And I think they liked that. I would say, I mean, I was successful. I mean, I didn't get any feedback from that part, but I felt that it went really well, because it meant that we worked quite efficiently. So I said, okay, so who wants to do this bit? Who wants to do this bit? Who wants to do this bit? And then we kind of wrote it all on this whiteboard function on Zoom, just bullet points of what each person was going to say in almost like order. And it worked really, really well. It was really organised. There was no kind of like, oh, who's going to say what next? It just made it so much easier. I always like to kind of have that clear in a presentation. Who's going to say what and in what order? So I think if no one's sorting that bit out in your group activity, then 100% be that person and get it organised. But without being too pushy, I always made sure I didn't speak over people, or I wasn't talking too much. I had so many ideas, but you've got to let other people talk at the same time. So because I'd come up with the app part, of it and I organised who was going to say what, I kind of then took a step back and allowed other people to come up with their ideas, and I really think that worked. And of course everyone always says ask other people what they think. If there's one person who's being quiet, ask them what they think. That didn't happen in my group, everyone talked, but definitely also commenting on what somebody else had said and like referring to them by name, I think is also really nice as well, just to show that you're building on other people's ideas. You're not just ignoring what they said, just like, oh, I really agree with what she said earlier as well, and we could implement that into it. So I do really think I just loved that group exercise. It was just so much fun, and I wasn't expecting it to be, because believe it or not, I am actually a really shy person in a group, and I tend to feel quite nervous about talking when other people are, because I don't like that awkward bit when you talk at the same time on Zoom. I just thought when I need to, and so I was really nervous I was going to be like that, but I wasn't at all, because everyone was just so nice. But just putting yourself in that position and just making sure that you say quite a bit but not too much. You don't want to be too pushy over everyone else, but is definitely a good thing. And then the final element was a written exercise again, which, as I mentioned earlier, was to write a memo of that idea to someone who hadn't attended, and I only had 20 minutes to do that. Again, I used headings. Headings are like really important, I think, and I also did kind of like a paragraph at the start to describe the idea, then bullet points for the strengths, bullet points for the weaknesses, and a little paragraph at the bottom again for the next steps. I just feel like that allowed me a bit more time, but also broke it up a little bit. I feel like if the whole thing was bullet points, it doesn't look as professional. It felt like it made more sense to do the strengths and weaknesses in bullet point form. So that is the way that I would say to do it. Sorry, my window's right here, and if you can see me looking, people are walking past my window and I'm checking they're not looking at me. But yeah, I do think that's a really good way to do it. So that was kind of like the last part. I've been through each of the different elements of the assessment centre and my biggest overall tips, and I hope that was useful. I'm going to try and cut out as much as I can, because currently I'm on 40 minutes which isn't great, but there will always be things that I forgot to say. So if you have any questions about anything, I had so many messages after I said that I got a vacation scheme of people asking for advice, and I just thought that was so nice, and I was always willing to do that. So please feel free to send a message if you have any questions, and thank you so much for watching, and give it a thumbs up if it was helpful.